Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. It's fantastic to see such a great turnout this evening. Welcome, really a big welcome this evening to our launch of the Cambridge Climate Change Charter. As I said, great to see so many people. So my name's Sarah, I'm the Chair of Trustees at Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and the Cambridge Climate Change Charter is a partnership project between the City Council and Cambridge Carbon Footprint. So we're really happy to be working with the Council on this project. I just wanted to give a quick intro to CCF before we kind of start the kind of main body of the meeting. So most of you probably know us already. We're a locally based charity here in Cambridge, working to support people and inspire them to take action towards low carbon living, both individually and in their communities. And we've been doing that, as I say, since 2005 through a whole range of different initiatives. So, for example, Open Eco Homes, which is now in its 10th year, which showcases lots of different homes around the city that have taken action to become more energy efficient and, generate low carbon energy, that kind of stuff. Also the Repair Cafe network that we've played a big part in spearheading in Cambridge and the surrounding villages, and lots of other kind of talks and workshops and different things that we do to try and, as I say, motivate people and engage with people on the issue of climate change and how people can make a real difference by taking action in their own lives. So do visit our website to find out a bit more about us, cambridgecarbonfootprint.org. And great to have you here to hear about the project this evening. So I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off with our speakers. So firstly, just to say, as you're all doing, I think, so far, please do keep yourselves on mute, but keep your video on because it's lovely to see everyone's faces. We've got a range of different people we're going to be hearing from, and there are a few options for Q&A, opportunities for Q&A throughout the evening. So when it is Q&A, what we'll do is, as you think of a question, just write it in the chat. You should be able to see the chat by just hovering your mouse at the bottom of the screen, and you can see the chat speech mark there. Just type your question in the chat, and then when it comes to Q&A, Nicole will either introduce you and then you can turn yourself off mute and ask your question, or if we have a range of questions on a similar topic, then Nicole will kind of group them together and read those out as kind of one question. If you've got any kind of technical issues with Zoom, do pop those in the chat as well, and we'll see if we can help. And yeah, I think that was it in terms of housekeeping. So just to kind of, just to introduce, I guess, our first speaker would be the first thing to do. We're going to hear a bit more about the Charter. So let's go over to Rosie Moore now, who's the Exec Councillor for Climate Change at the City Council. Rosie.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So welcome everyone, and I'd like to thank you all for coming to this launch event. And I would firstly like to start by thanking the team at the City Council and at Cambridge Carbon Footprint, who've worked so hard on not just making this Cambridge Climate Charter a reality, but who've also created a really useful, clear, and I feel very positive tool to help us all measure and then reduce our own carbon footprint. It has taken a little bit longer to launch than we planned. However, the timing now feels quite fitting, as if nothing else, then 2020 has taught us all that wide sweeping change really is possible, and that life as we know it, or at least life as we knew it in February, is not set in stone. The coronavirus crisis has really highlighted the damage that it does to people and our society as a whole, but it's also been clear that drastic change does not always have to lead to a decrease in the quality of life. But most importantly, it really has highlighted that the sooner we act on difficult things, the easier the change is and the bigger the impact it has. I'm very excited for this launch this evening because as a councillor, you can sometimes question what you're doing and whether you're really making a difference. So I'm very proud to have played the small part that I have in creating this charter, and I will be sharing it widely, as I really hope that everyone here will too. Many people, myself included, can feel that climate change is so big and so overwhelming that they just don't know where to start or whether their actions will make a difference. So the aim of this charter is to show individuals, organisations and businesses across Cambridge that there really are many ways that they can take action, and that collectively all of our actions add up to real change. It's also designed so that it's not just a one-off thing that you commit to, but that you keep on taking action over time, steadily reducing your emissions. And I believe that this charter will help individuals and businesses to feel positive that they can make a difference. The City Council has been working hard over the past few years to reduce our own carbon emissions, but we only account for just over 1% of the city's emissions as a whole. So in order to become a carbon neutral city, we really need every person, organisation and business to help us. Of course, we also really need swift and intelligent action further up the political food chain, as government action is vitally needed for new funding and up-to-date legislation. However, even government can't do it on their own, as they will still need individual action if we are to reach our zero carbon targets. And as we don't yet have that leadership from government, it's good not just to take our own positive steps toward carbon neutrality, but to also see that we're part of a bigger whole where we'll be able to see all of the positive actions adding up. I think it's too much to expect that the Charter will increase positive action exponentially, but I do hope that it will have a snowball effect as more people see others taking action and feel positive about taking their own actions. So thank you all very much for coming to this event, and I hope that we will all be inspired by the following experts and that you'll sign up to this Charter yourself and also spread the word to as many others around Cambridge as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Rosie. Thanks, great to hear from you. And I omitted to mention, which was an error on my part, given I'm so into my tweeting, that you can follow the event on social media. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, the hashtag is CAM Climate Charter, CAM Climate Charter, and Rethink Cambridge. So do join the conversation on there if you'd like to. And we're going to hear from Richard Hales to give a kind of organisational perspective as from one of our big employers in the city, Addenbrooke's Hospital. So Richard, over to you.
Oh, Richard, you're on mute.
And I'm not.
Is that better?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Rosie. And thanks, Nicole there. As I say, I'm Richard Hales. I sort of work on environmental sustainability here at Cambridge University Hospitals, probably better known as Addenbrooke's and the Rosie. Now, I guess you might be wondering what the hospital's doing on this agenda, apart from being a pretty big organisation in Cambridge. I think it's got a lot to do, a huge amount to do with those links between our health and climate change. Links that become very clear as soon as you start thinking about them. And I don't think it can really be said often enough that heat waves, flooding, sacrifice of productive land, the breakdown of supply chains and the spread of disease will define the health of our children's lives if we carry on increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Pretty straightforward, pretty much there. The good news is the NHS is committed to trying to stop this from happening. Now, signing and supporting the Charter here at Addenbrooke's and the Rosie is another really important step, I think, in the right direction for us. You might be excused for thinking that the pressure of running a big hospital and in the wake of COVID-19, that we might be a bit too preoccupied with other things. The Trust is a very busy place. But the case for tackling climate change remains just as strong and impossible to argue against as ever. And working with the City Council and everybody else in and around Cambridge to cut our carbon emissions just makes complete sense. And not doing so is just nonsense. Without a strong local response, we have little chance of getting from climate emergency to climate safety. The more individuals and organisations that sign up, the greater our ability will be to get there. And I think as Rosie mentioned, so much has changed since March, but that shows just that how much commitment and iterative actions where you plan, you do, you check that you've done it right, and then you go again, and you just keep getting better and stronger. And in that light, knitting together the actions amongst us all that are in the Climate Change Charter feels very doable. Plus, and here's a big plus, the great thing about the Charter actions is that they will all, one way or another, make us feel better physically and emotionally from the outset. The co-benefits of averting climate catastrophe are just too good to pass up. You've got cleaner air, fitter bodies, better food, reduced waste, looking after natural resources, greater self-sufficiency, and perhaps something that will become more and more apparent, less anxiety about the future. Some of these rewarding actions might be seen as one-offs in the Charter, but many will need to be built up over time. And even when you've done one, you're going to want to come back and just make sure that how you did it is still valid and whether maybe now you can do it a bit better. And so I think the key to success here is going to be supporting each other in our actions for the long term. Because most of the actions will require us to do a little bit of planning, then some doing, then some checking, and then going again with another action. And then, as I say, maybe coming back later and just checking the actions you did before are still in place. And this needs to go on and on and on for a while, a good while. And remember, nothing's going to diminish our worry over the future faster than doing something about it. So thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks very much, Richard. Thank you. Yeah. Lovely. Well, our next speaker is someone who's really kind of been the person at CCF leading this work and coming up with the Charter. And so it'll be great to hear her perspective on it all and the impact that it can have. So yeah, I'm going to hand over now to Annie Sander, who's going to introduce us to the Charter and the footprint calculator as well. Annie, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So yeah, as Sarah said, I'm going to quickly run you through the Charter, what it actually looks like, what it actually does. So as we've heard before, the Charter offers a practical way to take action for both individuals and businesses in Cambridge. And if we dive straight in, so for the businesses and households, we've developed the approach that we first offer them the option to calculate their carbon footprint and then decide what actions fit them best and pledge to take action in the Charter. So we've developed our own carbon footprint calculator with the help of some great volunteers and subject matter experts. So you can run through the calculator in 4 different areas. You're going to be asked some questions. Home energy, shopping, transport, and food, which are the 4 main areas of an individual's carbon footprint. So for each of these areas, you'll be prompted to give some answers, and that then will give you a rough estimate of your personal carbon footprint. You'll be able to identify which area of the footprint is the biggest, so which one you might want to focus on when taking action. And it also puts your carbon footprint into perspective, gives you some goals where you need to get to. So we have based our goals on the Committee for Climate Change's recommendation for reaching net zero by 2050. And that roughly means that each individual has to reduce their personal carbon footprint by 33% over the next 10 years. So how do we get there? How do we actually support individuals to make these changes? Is with the Charter. So individuals are then encouraged to take action, to pledge to take action. Again, we've been working with some volunteers, some subject matter experts on this. There has been a psychologist involved to help us really get the wording right and really look at this from a behavior change point of view. So to really help people make that change in their personal life. So for the individuals, we've divided the actions into two major areas, which is on the one hand measuring and reducing emissions, and on the other hand demonstrating climate leadership. So the measuring and reducing emissions again are divided into the four main areas of the carbon footprint, which users will probably have seen when they fill in the charter. And we give them a bit of background information. There is information on each of the actions available on the website. And we've also come up with a star rating to help indicate which actions are the most effective. So 3 stars meaning that an action will have a big effect on their carbon footprint, 1 star having a smaller impact. And then climate leadership is something else that is really important for us in the Charter. We don't only want to empower people to take action in their own lives, but we also want them to go out there, become an advocate, speak to others, and make change in their community. So each individual, everyone who signs up to the Charter is asked to not only pledge actions for themselves, but also to demonstrate climate leadership. And then after selecting your actions, the usual, when you sign up to something, put in your personal your contact details, let us know whether you want to be contacted later on, and submit. A similar process for the businesses. However, we do currently not offer a carbon footprinting tool, so no estimates for businesses. They may, however, choose to make that their first action, for example, when they sign up. They might want to calculate their carbon emissions. So the 3 areas for businesses are measuring and reporting their emissions to get a better understanding of what emissions they're actually producing, starting to decarbonize their operations, so actually making changes in their everyday running, and again demonstrating climate leadership because businesses and organizations are at the heart of our community as well, and they can really be leaders and make a difference within Cambridge. After signing up, we're not leaving it there. As I said, users can let us know if they want to be contacted. There will be regular newsletters available, but there's also a lot of resource online on the new website. So there's guidance available for each of the actions. As you can see, we've divided them again into the 4 main areas of the individual's carbon footprint, but there's also guidance for businesses and particularly on climate leadership. So under the climate leadership heading, for example, you get all the actions, all the overviews, and when you select the action that you want to find out more about, it gives you a bit of background. Why is that action important? What are the co-benefits? Like Richard mentioned earlier, to most of these actions, there will be other benefits than just reducing your personal or your business's carbon footprint. There will also be other co-benefits like health, or for businesses, it will be something like exposure or networking and that sort of thing. So why should you be taking this action? And then specifically, of course, how? So we try to offer as much help as we can to make the pledge a success. So all in all, the Charter is trying to be a practical way of helping individuals sign up, make a pledge, commit to taking action, and then we can join the community to make the change happen. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Annie. Thank you. So we're going to have a slot for questions now. So we've got about 10 minutes or so for this part, and then we'll hear from a few more people about the different areas of personal carbon footprints, and then we'll go into another question and answer session after that. So a couple of chances. So Nicole, do you want to bring in the first questioner or suggesting
Yeah.
questions?
Alana, can you stop sharing that screen? Lovely. Yes, so there was a question, let's see, there's a question from Janice. Do you wanna ask a question? You thought maybe it was a bit too broad brush on some of the actions. Janice?
Right.
No.
Yes, sorry.
Oh yeah. Hi, Janice.
Hi. I'm quite.
Your question, please, Janice.
Well, the question was that climate. I felt it would give a false picture. The analysis, because it said things like transport. Do you drive a car? Yes. Do you drive less than 5,000 miles? I actually drive less than 1,000 miles. I use it very, very rarely and only for big journeys, really. And yet I would be given this big weighting of carbon footprint for my 1,000, which is lumped in with 5,000. Is it possible to make it a little bit more specific?
There's definitely room for improvement with the calculations. Yes, and we don't expect this to be the last iteration of the calculator that we have. If you've got any feedback like that, we're very happy to collect it and use it for the next update. At the moment, what we did is we tried to get a working calculation, giving you a good estimation of your carbon footprint without asking too many too detailed questions. And then also based on values that we have. So it is quite a complex process to get a tool that actually adds something, so gives you actually something back, but also isn't too laborious to fill in and actually relies on facts. So that's the kind of triangle that we try to fill with this calculator. But if you've got any particular feedback, then please feel free.
I see that, but it might be possible to just tick a box. 1 to 2,000, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, sort of, yeah, something like that.
Thanks, Janice. I might have to move on to the next question, but good points. Thank you very much. Vicky Lacey, do you want to unmute and ask your question about maybe teams working together?
Hello.
Hi, Vicky.
Yes, I wondered whether there is the opportunity to kind of set up a team, for example, the team that you work in at work, or maybe a community group, where you could work together on reducing your carbon footprint and share your footprints online so that you can kind of see how other people are making changes.
I think it's a really good suggestion. Who's best? Annie, can you take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one again. So at the moment, I don't know whether you've seen that on my screen. At the moment, it gives you, we were able to put in a rough estimate for how much your actions will save. So if you go in and pledge, then it gives you at the end a rough estimate of how much carbon that would for an average person, how much that would save. So you could use something like that. So you could add all of these pledges up if you wanted to play against each other to gamify this. Or another thing is to ask your team to everyone fill in the calculator and then ask them to go back in half a year and do it again and see what the difference is. So there are definitely ways you can do that. And if you speak to us, I'm sure we can find a way to help you set something up for your team. We don't have anything planned in the charter just yet to do that publicly. But yeah, it is always, it has been a thought on the back of our minds that this would be something quite nice to like create a challenge within within a business or an organization, that to let people play against each other. Yeah, if that is something that you would like to do in your organization, speak to us and we might be able to help you with that.
Sorry, Annie, another one for you. You're not getting much of a break, but we've had quite a few questions, people asking whether they can get active on the calculator yet. There's a few people raring to go. So
the calculator is ready, waiting in the background. We've hit the go live button earlier today, so we're just basically waiting for the internet to catch up with us. So it will be online on the CCF homepage, basically as soon as the server gets around to putting it online. We'll let you know via social media when that is.
okay. Tom, have you picked up any questions that you? There's a question from James about climate and ecological emergency bill. James Murray-White. James, are you there?
Sorry, Nicole.
Oh, hi, James. Okay.
Yeah, just a direct question to Daniel, who's with us somewhere. Caroline Lucas's climate and ecological emergency bill went to Parliament, didn't get a lot of support. So how can we as Cambridge constituents, regular folk, be doing this incredible work, but not if our MPs are behind it?
Daniel, do you want to respond or?
Good evening, Sarah. I'm not sure we want to get into a party political debate this evening. There's lots that's good about Caroline's bill, but the truth is it won't get discussed, won't get voted on. I don't think it's going to achieve anything like the amount that's going to be achieved by this fantastic initiative tonight. So let's concentrate on doing what we do in Cambridge, which I think is really positive, and I strongly support the initiative tonight. Thanks, Sarah.
Disagree, Daniel.
Thanks for coming in there, Daniel.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah, really appreciated. Sorry, Nicole, over to you, sorry.
Yeah, Chris Moller, do you want to come and ask a question? I don't know, whoever feels best to take it can take it. Chris?
My general question about translating the energy from COVID into climate change energy. We've seen that really for the first time, everyone has had to experience that you can change the world radically, that we all live in a global village, and that radical change is possible. We've learned all that through COVID, really many of us for the first time. And my question is, what can we do to translate that energy and that understanding that we've got from COVID so that it gets applied to climate change, which is obviously equally pressing, but not quite so instantly recognizable? I know it's not an easy question.
Shall I have a go?
Yeah, go, Rosie.
So I would agree that it's not easy. I was listening to the radio earlier today about all the wildfires around California, and yet there are still lots of people in California who just don't believe that climate change is real, even when it's literally the world is burning around them. So I don't have any great things that we can do immediately, but I do think that we do need to use this time. It is a time of change. A lot of things will not go back to normal simply because there are things that some people won't want to go back to normal, such as working from home. For a lot of people, that's worked out well and they enjoy it, saving them time on their commute. And I think we need to show that big changes in society don't always have to result in negativity. And I think that that's one of the problems when people feel that if we're going to really deal with climate change, it's all going to be us living in the cold and the dark and not going on holiday and not eating nice food. And I think this is a real time to show that we can make real change, to actually make lives better as well. Actually, people can live in warmer homes, we can be healthier, and we can have a more equal society whilst also dealing with climate change. So I'm sorry, I don't exactly know how. If I did, I would be shouting it from the rooftops. But I do think that now is a chance to really make a difference.
By the way, people on this call might be interested to know that there's a European Green New Deal proposal, call for proposals coming out next week, probably. And amazingly, the UK is fully entitled to participate in it. And I'm preparing a proposal for that.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and thanks. And just to echo what Rosie said there and what Alana has put in the chat, you know, this charter, which is focused on what we as individuals and as organisations can do, is just part of the picture, obviously. And, you know, it's not to say that campaigning for change at a national level and international level, all of that stuff is massively, massively important. But we as individuals can take action, and actually by taking action, firstly, we feel good and empowered, and that gives us a boost, but also we show leadership in our communities and demonstrate that low carbon living is possible and is, you know, good for your well-being, good for your heating bills, you know, good for all that stuff. So it's part of the picture, not the whole picture, and we totally recognise that. So we're going to move on now to the next set of speakers that are going to look in a bit more kind of detail at the different areas of the carbon footprint. And then we will have time for a bit more question and answer before we close. So the first person I wanted to turn to is Bev Sedley from Cambridge Sustainable Food. Bev, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm Bev Sedley. I'm chair of Cambridge Sustainable Food, which is a partnership campaigning to achieve healthy and sustainable food for everyone. At present, our major focus is on leading Cambridge's coronavirus emergency food response. With the help of Cambridge City Council and the Food Poverty Alliance, we've created a central distribution hub to enable tons of surplus food to be delivered to 8 new food hubs around the city. But maybe more relevant to today's event, we aim to mitigate climate change, working with individuals, families, communities and businesses to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, over the next year, we will be rolling out a Food for Our Future campaign and a challenge in the City and South Cambs, focusing on reducing food waste and meat and dairy consumption. So this will actually tie in really neatly with the Charter. So watch this space and please join us. So why is food so important? Our food system contributes 20 to 30% of human-generated greenhouse gas emissions, which is enormous, and is a leading cause of deforestation, land use change, and biodiversity loss, 70% of human water use, and a major cause of water pollution. And the greatest impacts are at the agricultural stage. Livestock for meat, eggs, and milk is 14.5% of total greenhouse gas emissions and utilises 70% of agricultural land. Moving on, what is there that we can get involved with locally before I go on to the Charter? Alana, can I have the first slide? The picture.
Yeah.
This is going to be a lovely picture of a volunteer in the rain at Co Farm, I hope, Cambridge's new community farm, which is harvesting its first crops this year and donating them to the coronavirus food response. So there's lots of volunteers needed here. There are also longer standing community gardens such as Empty Common. So look on the Transition website and the CSF website if you want volunteering opportunities. CSF's Grow a Row scheme, donating homegrown produce to the COVID emergency food response, has got that's just happened in the last few months, and that's really growing now. And we've also got all these new community fridges for repurposing surplus food. There are 8 in Cambridge City and at least 3 in South Cambs. If you want to volunteer for the coronavirus food response, email Louise at cambridgesustainablefood.org. And now the Charter. Can I have the second slide, please, Alana? Have you got the list of actions for the food? there's the picture of the volunteer in the rain. Alana, if you can go to the, yeah. This is the chart of actions in the food section. So you click on one of the actions. Doesn't look quite like that there, but at least you can see them all really clearly. And it leads to a page. So we've got go veggie or vegan, eat beef and lamb no more than once a week. So these are the options you can choose. And if you click on one of them, it gives you a sort of guidance page. If we can have the next slide with the guidance page. So this, for example, is the option eat less hard cheese. People know more about meat reduction, but actually eating a very hard cheese is pretty much up there with lamb and beef. So people know less about that. So first of all, you've got why is this important? And there are also links there. If we can have the next slide, Alana, thanks. This is a link here to a Guardian article, avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth. So you've got sort of background stuff and then you've got a how section. We can have the next slide, which has links to things like this Food Unfolded website, which will give you the carbon footprint of common foods. And there are also lots of recipe links and other websites that you can go to for tips on how to take action here with that one. An example of a fairly low hanging fruit, like thanks. A meat eater could choose an action like go meat free at least once a week, which is pretty straightforward, just one day. And a bit harder for people who like dairy would be eat vegan 1 or more days a week. You'll notice, actually they're not shown on there, but you've seen it with Annie's presentation. There are stars against the actions. The more stars mean bigger reductions in emissions. Okay, if you could just stop showing the sharing documents now, Ilana. One tip that I find useful, for most of us, it's really hard to keep things up if we go cold turkey, which is why we don't include becoming a vegan on the list. It's often easier to make changes incrementally, and it's also easier if you do it with other people, which is why CSF, when we do our challenge, our Food for the Future challenge, will be encouraging people to take that challenge in communities or families, family groups. That question came up. I think Vicky Lacey gave that earlier. I remember doing a Go Vegan for a Month challenge with CCF years ago, and it was much more fun because those of us who were doing it kept in touch and had some shared meals. It's likely that those of us attending this launch will already be doing a lot to reduce our carbon footprint. So it would be really good for us to encourage others to take part. People have already said that within our family or workplace or club. And that's one reason the climate leadership category is there, so we can multiply our actions. Time is really short. We need to take whatever action we can and encourage others to do the same. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bev. That's great. Thank you. Super. Okay. Over to Nicola Terry, who is an expert in all things home energy. So Nicola, do enlighten us on what we can do in that aspect.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I've been volunteering with Transition Cambridge and Cambridge Carbon Footprint for about 10 years now, all to do with home energy. And I have a new career, which is about home energy as well. I do research mainly for the government on energy use in buildings and modelling and stuff. And I have a blog, Energy Thoughts and Surprises, which is quite a lot about home energy. There are other things too. One of the things I've been volunteering with Cambridge Carbon Footprint is Open Eco Homes, which is a programme that happens yearly when we look at other people's houses and learn about how to make our houses more energy efficient. And I'll be talking about that a bit more later on. In terms of what we're already doing, I was told to say what we already do. So I have no car. We mostly go on holiday by train. I have drastically reduced meat consumption, and we mainly have local vegetables now because we use a veg box scheme. So that's my actions that I've done so far. About the calculator. you may be surprised how much of an impact even a gas heating has on your carbon footprint. A typical gas bill will be 2.5 tons of carbon emissions per year, and an electricity bill is another ton. Of course, that's shared out between however many people you have in your house. So, you know, living close together is quite good, but we don't all do that. And the electricity from the carbon emissions from electricity has halved over the last decade in the time I've been looking at it, which is really excellent news. Obviously, we're using much less coal and also more renewables, which is why it's happening, which is absolutely great. And this kind of is showing the way very clearly. If we want to go carbon free in our heating, a very good way to do that is to switch over to electricity. Not necessarily by a direct electric, but using a heat pump, which is a far more efficient way of doing it. I think I'm very pink. I'm just going to turn my light on. Is that better? Right. So the calculator looks at your space heating, water heating, and appliances. It allows for solar PV panels. At least it doesn't as of this morning, but I think it will do soon. And that, as well as looking at the calculator, the fabric of your house and your heating system, it looks at your behaviour as well. How much hot water you use, how you set your thermostats and schedules, do you turn your appliances off when you're not using them, all that kind of thing. You'll be asked questions on this. And so that obviously immediately gives you some ideas of what you could do for actions. Other actions you can do are things like fixing your drafts, insulating your house. It's very difficult to predict how much difference these things are going to make. You know your house better than we do. And even if you have a proper survey, it isn't always an exact science. But these things are worth doing. And if you're looking at big things like insulation or heat pumps, this is actually quite an interesting time to do it, because with the post-COVID economic recovery push, we have the Green Homes Grant Scheme, which gives you can give you a voucher for up to £5,000 towards doing big things on your house. And to support you in that, Open Eco Homes has got several really good, interesting events this year. So we've got one talk on heat pumps on the 12th of October, one on the Green Homes Grant Scheme on the 21st of September. And one of the homes that we've got for you to look at is entitled Getting Off Gas. It actually has a retrofit heat pump. So these are really interesting things that you can, ways for you to find out more about what you can do. My house was an Open Eco Homes house for a while. It's got stacks and stacks of insulation, floors, ceilings, walls, everything. We halved our gas bills, which is, you know, worth doing. Mind you, we were starting from a low base because it was a Victorian detached house with solid walls. We also have solar PV and hot water. If I knew then what I know now, we would have put in underfloor heating if we possibly could. We have been considering a heat pump, but we're now considering a hybrid heat pump, which is a heat pump with a backup gas boiler as well. So we're looking into that. Co-benefits. It was really, really worthwhile. In fact, we didn't actually do it necessarily to be eco. What we did to our house, we did it to be comfortable. And lo and behold, we are now more comfortable, which is nice. I have less eczema because, you know, the house is at a reasonable temperature all the time. It's nice, even temperature. If you've got respiratory problems, that's a really great way to improve your health. Getting away from gas also improves air pollution, as in reduces it, because there's no nitrogen dioxide, which is generated even from a gas boiler. And so if you have renewable electricity, then there's no air pollution. So switching over to electricity for your heating improves your environment, both inside and outside. I hope that's given you some ideas of what we can do. Do come and join Open Eco Homes, and also Transition Cambridge. The next meeting will be about air tightness, so you might be interested in that too. That's on the 21st.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Thanks very much for that. Lots of inspiring things that people can do at home. The next big section is transport. So we have Edward Lee joining us to discuss transport elements of your carbon footprint. Edward.
Good evening, everyone. Alana, can you share my slides? So I lead Smarter Cambridge Transport, and we are all volunteers, and our aim is to advance sustainable, integrated and equitable transport for the Cambridge region. And we're behind a key idea that's being developed by the Greater Cambridge Partnership and also the Combined Authority of Rural Travel Hubs, which are transport interchanges that link people in rural areas directly to rail and express bus services. So Cambridge is a cycling city, or it should be, but actually in reality, only about 27% of the trips of the vehicle movements within the city centre. Alana, can you move to the next slide, please? So only 27% of the trips within the city are by cycle, but it's only 5% of the trips into the city are by cycle. So I think one of the things that we really need to focus on, particularly in the sort of COVID environment, where public transport is necessarily going to be carrying fewer people than it was before. Active travel, cycling and walking really are the things that we need to develop now, and that's what the local authorities are working on. So the efforts at the moment by the Greater Cambridge Partnership are to develop greenways, which will be effectively bridges into the city, connecting those local villages in the way that Shelford is now. But we also need, as city residents, we need to welcome schemes that are designed to make cycling within the city easier and safer and more attractive for people living in the city and living outside the city. So things like the promoting the low traffic routes within the city, things like the Mill Road closure, Nightingale Avenue, Fendon Roundabout, these things, although they're controversial and they are disruptive, they are moving us in the direction we need to go in, which is to make cycling a more normal mode of transport for many, many more people. And by doing that, by replacing car trips, which can be up to 10 miles if you have an e-bike, we're going to reduce congestion within the city and in the villages around the city. Cycling obviously has tiny carbon emissions and negligible pollution, so it's absolutely what we need to be doing in that respect. It gives independence to children who don't have to be reliant on their parents to ferry them around. It gives independence to a lot of disabled people. I mean, often when we're talking about what we call modal filters, where we sort of block ordinary through traffic, people will cite, well, how will disabled people cope? Well, actually, lots of disabled people can get around very well on cycles, and many disabled people cannot drive. So, there's a balance to be struck there. But also, really importantly, poor people who can't afford a car and don't have access to a car. If we give them access to the city by cycling, then that gives them access to the jobs and the wealth within the city. That's really important from an equitable point of view. And cycling complements public transport really well. It helps to solve that first last mile connectivity problem that public transport will always have. And as we mentioned before, it improves physical and mental health, and that's really important. All of that supports one of the pledges. So if we just move on to the next slide, next, please, and then to the next slide. So the supporting cycling is absolutely aligned with the first of those pledges, which is to use the car less. So can we move forward one slide again? But what I focused on as an illustration for you is 3 of these pledges are to do with reducing flying. And this is because this has the single largest impact of anything we can do. The one action that we can take that will have a huge impact on our carbon footprints. And so just moving to the next slide, there's 3 pledges there, and they're all around thinking about how we can either replace flying with an alternative or by flying a shorter distance. And to just illustrate the difference it can make, just on the next slide, I've illustrated the carbon footprint for a typical 4-person family, so 2 adults, 2 children, and what the carbon footprint breaks down with if they did a holiday to Disneyland, Florida. So they fly to Orlando. So that red block is the carbon footprint of that holiday in the context of a carbon footprint for everything else throughout the entire year. And if they switch that holiday from Disneyland Florida to Disneyland Paris, then the carbon footprint dramatically reduces. You know, traveling by train to Paris has a almost negligible carbon footprint compared to flying. So this really is, if there's one thing that everybody should be thinking hard about, is how to cut out flying or reduce flying, because that's the first step to making a big dent on our carbon footprints. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Edward. I love that final slide there. That's so impactful, isn't it? Showing the difference. Thank you for that. Okay, so the final area of the carbon footprint that we wanted to touch on is shopping and sort of consumption, consumerism. So over to Tom Bragg to fill us in on that one.
Okay, I'm going to share a screen with you, I hope. And so this is shopping. By this we mean everything but the food we buy, all the other things we're spending money on. And on average, it's about 20% of UK persons' carbon footprint. Although this is very variable. And of course, it just depends how much you're spending on what things. And it's also very hard to measure, so it's often neglected. But we do need to take account of this. And one of the challenges is, of course, the consumer society we live in, where everyone is persuaded to try and buy more. We're interested to choose carefully and to buy less. One of the main projects that Cambridge Carbon Footprint has is called Circular Cambridge. And as you'll see up here, it's about living well with less stuff. And we do this by, for example, by swishes, clothes swaps. This was at a sustainable fashion festival we had. But as you see, it's quite hard to make this COVID safe. We are finding ways of doing that with repair cafes. So this was in the traditional face-to-face repair cafe, and this happy woman has brought in her electric mains-powered hedge trimmer, and she cut through the cable, very easily done, and Homebase, where she bought it from, advised her that this was not repairable and she needed to buy another one. So she searched and was delighted to find a repair cafe, and it was actually very straightforward to mend with this little inline mains connector that she was told to bring, and we all were able to mend this together. And it's great when you get people engaged in their items that way. There's also in Cambridge, of course, loads of charity shops and other second-hand outlets. There is a boom at the moment through the COVID time in pre-loved second-hand clothes. And Oxfam Online, for example, are doing twice the turnover of this time last year. And so it's another good COVID thing that maybe we can learn to continue. When you do your footprint on shopping, you will get suggested possible actions. And here are about half of them, including, this is trying to illustrate upcycling a piece of furniture. But as you see, a big variety of things. I'm just going to highlight two. This decluttering and rehoming that Anne and I are doing a lot of. We're trying to make space for the builders to do a load of insulation work. And she's been just expert at finding new homes for our things we don't need anymore, both through free cycle and some selling them on Gumtree. And the idea also is to enjoy having fewer bits of clutter and just trying to keep the things you really love and enjoy. Another one is this buying refurbished electronics, and I was delighted to find a small Windows 10 laptop that I bought refurbished from Argos, and I just loved it. It was a marvelous little computer, very portable, and I'm glad to say that now my granddaughter is busy using it and loving it as well. So here's just some of the actions. I can't cover it all now. And a lot of them have co-benefits, of course. As you can imagine, a lot of these will save money. Some of them will enable you to help your community. Repair cafes, again, a bit of an example of a community activity. I should have said Transition Cambridge are heavily involved with Cambridge Carbon Footprint in the repair cafes. And nearly everyone wants to reduce waste. These two are such good motivators for people once they understand the impact their shopping can make. And so, and spreading the word on this. Maybe you're interested and involved in some aspect of this. Maybe you like upcycling, or is there some other recycling? Is there some other part of this that you're particularly engaged with? Then you could be showing climate leadership, in influencing others on that, talking about it. Let them know what you're doing. And this is another important aspect of the Charter pledging. And so I just want to finally say, in the words of, I've forgotten her name now. Anyway, a great slogan: buy less, choose well, make it last. That's the nub of what we need to do with shopping. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. That was great. Thank you. So we've had a kind of quick run through of the different areas that make up the carbon footprint and some of the actions that the Charter is going to suggest that we're running up to 8 o'clock, which is the finish time. What I'm going to suggest is that we will stay on the call for those that would like to continue the discussion for about another 15 minutes. So we'll have the kind of final Q&A in those final 15 minutes. But for those of you that do need to log off at 8, just wanted to reiterate really, you'll get an email with the link to the Charter having attended this event as soon as it's live. So it'll be on our website, cambridgecarbonfootprint.org. So please do go on there, sign up to the Charter, share it with your friends, share it with your family, and generally kind of encourage people to sign up, and hopefully this can really kind of make an impact in Cambridge. And also just to remind you that there's going to be an informal Charter coffee catch up on Zoom on Thursday at 5 o'clock. So if you want to kind of hear more about the Charter or discuss it with anyone in the team, then that's another opportunity on Thursday to do that. And do check out the Open Eco Homes events coming up as well. I think there have been links put in the chat to those. So thanks again for all the speakers that have joined us this evening, and we'll now go into Q&A for the final 15 minutes or so. So Nicole, what questions have we got coming in?
Yeah, there's a question from Kathy Dunbar. Kathy, and it was your question about, do all Cambridge new builds need to be carbon neutral? I think maybe Tom might be able to answer that, possibly Nicola. Kathy Dunbar?
Well, shall I have a go answering that anyway? So yes, is the short answer. We really ought to have higher standards of new build, and we'd very much like the government to impose this. The council has some limited powers in insisting on low carbon build, but some of the new build that is still being put up now, I think, is scandalous, because it will have to be retrofitted before long. And but also Open Eco Homes, it taps into a huge demand that people who can afford to do so are doing this already. But plainly, we need much tightening of the building regulations to make this widespread.
Rosie.
Yes, I just wanted to say that unfortunately we can't require that as a city council. The last Labour government did have legislation that from 2016 all new builds would need to be zero carbon, and in fact the building industry was prepared for it and ready, and sadly it was scrapped. So we've gone backwards. We are the City Council in conjunction with South Cambs. We're writing our new local plan, and so we will be pushing the legislation to require as much as possible. But even now, we can't require that they're 100%, which makes no sense. We're just building up problems for the future. So I agree, and we will be pushing as hard as we can when we go for our new local plan.
James Murray White, thanks Rosie. You had a question about the electric car club that was proposed for the village. I don't know if Ian Cray is there. Ian Cray, I know you registered. Are you here?
Sorry, I'm here. Forgive me for not having my screen up. Yeah, James, there is a car club already in Cambridge. The City Council worked hard with a number of providers. Transition have been supporting it. Today there are...
Is it electric, Ian, though? I understand that Peter Pope from Transition did suggest...
If you don't mind, I'd like to finish.
Sure.
The vehicles are both electric and hybrid, with the intention to move to full electric. Some are already electric, James. And as with all these things, it's partly demand-led. So today there are 50 vehicles. The previous scheme was only 16. And of course, the COVID situation has affected demand, but we remain confident that it's part of a solution. So there is EV vehicles already available and also hybrids.
Okay, well, I'll check it out and I'll sign up to it if it's any good, Ian. Thank you.
Lovely. This is quite a specific question, but it's a question I've often wondered about, from Richard Potter, about is it better to have your shopping delivered or go to the shops? Richard, are you around? Well, I can ask Richard's question. Anybody know the answer?
Depends whether you cycle to the shop.
I did look at this on my blog a while back, and I came to the conclusion, I can't remember, but it was something along the lines of, it was, obviously if you cycle to the shops, then that's going to be generally better. Actually, not obviously, but it is. And if you would have travelled in your car more than a mile or so, then it's worth having it delivered. I did look at it on my blog. I'll see if I can find a link.
Yeah, so Trevor Nicol, Head of Waste for the city. The difference will be is if when you buy online, you tend to think about what you're buying. So you tend not to do those extra purchases. So it depends on what's better is a hard description, but you probably produce less food waste because you really consider what you're buying at each purchase and buy less of those spontaneous or bonus items. So it better is a hard description.
Trevor, I'm not sure I agree with that because I walk to my local shops and I buy locally. When we had the lockdown, I had to order online and I found that to get my free delivery, I was having to buy things that I never would buy and didn't really want, but it was just the panic of the COVID thing. So to get my free delivery, I bought stuff that I still have now. Whereas that doesn't happen when I make my shopping list and go shopping. And the other thing is that when it came, I was horrified. There was masses of plastic bags. I take my own reusable bag. They'd even put one box of Scott's porridge oats in a whole plastic bag to itself.
So I think the important thing you said there is about making that list. So that's really important to think before you go shopping, whether that's online, in person or locally. So buy what you need and think what you're buying and think what you're buying it in. So whether that's, think about the packaging. So
I actually have a regular thing where I go through the fridge and I make a list of what to use up, what I need to add to it. Then I do a shopping list and I go shopping. Easy peasy.
Okay, thanks, Janice.
Everyone be more like Janice.
Yeah.
Right.
Lovely.
Nicole, what else? What other questions?
I mean, I guess this is a big question that a lot of people are thinking about. It's a question from Cambridge Friends of the Earth about, and I don't know who wants to answer it, but does the government's growth agenda wipe out all the good that we can do as individuals? Anybody fancy that one?
I'll have a go. I don't think it has to, but it comes back to the point that we had before on planning. Obviously, even building new buildings is going to create more emissions than if we don't, but we do have a need. And presumably what we want to do here is not just combat climate change, but also create a better, more equal, more sustainable world for all of us. So if there's thought and care put into that growth, there are people and they need homes. That one of the biggest issues that we go around with is that it's consumption that's the problem, and that a lot of that can be dealt with at source with good planning and good design.
If I could just sort of interject there, I mean, you use the word we need more housing in Cambridge. I mean, I would suggest that the whole of Britain does not need more growth in Cambridge because it's sucking people and resources away from other areas of the country. So it's a bit, we consider it's a bit of a fallacy to suggest that Cambridge needs growth. I mean, it's the old infinite growth on a finite planet thing on a smaller local scale. We need to sort of question the idea that why does Cambridge need to grow? There are other parts of the country that need massive investment. Cambridge is one of the few parts of the country that's making any money, really, if you want to be cynical. So should not some of the, we'd be spreading some of the joy around other parts of the country? I mean, there are, you know, the further north you go, the more, if you like, devastated the economy becomes, if you don't want to sound too portentous there. And yet everything's been piled into Cambridge, an area with a lack of, it's running out of water, etc., etc. We're trying to cram however many new people into essentially a medieval city, and so on and so forth. And we're trying to somehow square that with Cambridge getting a zero carbon footprint, which strikes me as a trifle odd. I mean, I admit at a local level, the council is hamstrung to a large degree, but do we need to apply more pressure to central government? How can we do that when they seem to be hell-bent on taking power away from local residents and local government? You know, we've got the planning bill, as someone pointed out quite rightly earlier on, which is basically, it's going to be almost like the Wild West with regards to planning, because we assume they've been lobbied to death by developers, you know, who are going to go to give them jobs when they lose their ministerial posts, if we're going to be cynical. And we're confronted with all of that and trying to make Cambridge zero carbon, you know, when the government seems to be not really caring about that. Anyway, rant over. But so yeah, we're definitely not blaming local government. Your hands are tied more than ours, but you'd be like, you're the next people up the food chain, if you like, and help.
Can I just clarify, when I said we need more housing, I did actually mean nationally. And I would
fair enough.
say that even if Cambridge becomes zero carbon by not growing and by everyone signing up to this charter, actually we also do need the whole of the UK, the whole of the world to act. So I think we shouldn't just think about ourselves as Cambridge in terms of the growth. It is nationally.
Great, agreed. Yeah, thank you.
I've got quite a specific question here. Thanks, Cambridge Foe. Thanks, Rosie. It's from Ursula, and she asked if we would. Ursula, are you around? Ursula was basically asking if we'd be able to see a list of the businesses that sign up to the charter, Annie, and maybe you could list some of the ones that have already signed up, or organisations.
Yes, so everyone who signs the charter can make that pledge public. We do not estimate carbon savings for businesses at the moment, just because the way that, you know, the actions they can select, it's just too much of really, it's quite a big task to calculate carbon emissions for businesses and organizations. So you can't just do that on the charter itself. So there's no way of tracking how much reduction a business has pledged to make, but businesses that decide to sign up publicly, which I assume would be most of the businesses that sign, can showcase their actions that they are pledging. In regards to, I know there was a bit of a discussion I've been reading, I've tried to follow it in the chat, about then actually holding them to account is a completely different thing, because then you would actually have to have the staff to go in and engage and follow up and that sort of thing. At the moment, the charter isn't set up to do that, but it's got the potential to become a tool to do that, to enable us to do that. So it's not at the moment. At the moment, pledges can be made public, so you can check in whether your favorite bakery has signed up or not. But what we're not doing is actually checking in on them and seeing whether they've actually installed the insulation that they said they would. That, however, might be something that the council decides to do later.
And Annie, I think, am I right in saying Adam Brooks have signed up so far, Anglia Ruskin University, Cambridge Clean Tech? Yeah, that's the ones that I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, there are a couple of flagship organizations that have signed up, and once the charter comes online, the charter website comes online, they'll be featured on the new website, so you can flick through and see who's already signed up.
Okay, right. There's one more question here. We've got time for one more, Sarah.
Yeah, one more, I think, Nicole.
Okay. Ranjan, do you want to come and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Really interesting presentations, everyone. So my question is a bit about advocacy. So there was at the start there was a point about how we can recommend participation in this and signing up to it to friends and people in the community. Any tips on how we can be persuasive about participating to those who might not naturally be as persuaded by climate issues? So politically neutral ways, for example, of persuading people to get involved, because I mean, all the people here, I'm sure, are very, very dedicated to this cause. But you know, is there a risk of, you know, when you have people signing up, you end up getting a high representation of, I don't know, vegan cyclists or whatever, you know, rather than getting a spread of the population in Cambridge? And you know, how can we kind of do that sort of outreach in a kind of not aggressive, proselytizing kind of way?
Anybody like to take that? I know we had a psychologist on the team that looked at behaviour change models and how to engage people, you know, where they are at. Anybody want to speak to that?
I was just going to come in to say, yeah, it's a really great question. I'm sure others can answer, but from my perspective, I think there's a few things. So one is about the messenger and who's getting the message. So picking someone to be the messenger who the other person will relate to, and is kind of you know, has a similar background to them, or you know, they can see themselves in that person, because that always really helps. Also thinking about the motivation of that person and what they're interested in. So I read an interesting thing the other day about Veganuary, that Veganuary is now an absolutely huge success, you know, fantastic growth in Veganuary over the last 5 years or so. The number one reason for people that sign up to Veganuary is nothing to do with climate change. It's health, it's, you know, personal health. So yeah, thinking about, you know, what is that person interested in? What do they care about? What are the co-benefits of doing something like this? And not to say you shouldn't talk about the climate crisis, absolutely do, but that's not something that's necessarily going to motivate everyone. So thinking about other things that might interest them, that could motivate them. But keen to hear other perspectives on that question, because it's a really good one.
Thank you.
Could I just add, because there have been a couple of points in the chat that people sort of already do all of this, and the point is that this charter is totally aimed at those people who aren't already engaged at the moment, and that's why we want to make it positive and not simple, but to see that actually you can make change, and that if we all make change, it will result in something wider. But so we at the City Council will be advertising the charter, but if anyone has any helpful suggestions on how to reach more people, then they would be gratefully received.
I think someone had thanks Rosie, someone had a lovely idea about setting up an app, so there's like a gaming thing where you could kind of compete in your neighborhood and things like that, or compete against your friends to get the greatest carbon emissions. I think that could be interesting. Sarah.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone. Really great to see so many people join the call. I hope you found it an interesting discussion. Loads of good suggestions and ideas, and debate in the chat, which is really good to see. So as I said, there is another opportunity on Thursday. If you want to hear more about the charter at 5 o'clock, we're going to be having a conversation session about the charter, so do get in touch about that. You'll get a recording of this session and also the links to the charter for you to sign up and everything else by email after this meeting. And yeah, so go check it out, sign up and spread the word, and hopefully the charter will do really well and inspire lots of people to take action on their carbon footprints. So thanks again to all our speakers. Thanks for joining, and see you soon. Bye.
Thanks everyone.